piercing is the reason that we don't stack entities anymore, right? It used to be like, you'd stack 4, 5, 6 LLCs to make it hard to find, right?
Yeah.
The internet searching and piercing got rid of it. So one LLC between you and your property is more than enough, because if I can pierce one, I'm going to get them all. And if I get back to the person, then I get all of their assets. When you go from the top, none of that limited liability stuff matters, right? When you go from the owner back down, right? So if piercing one is piercing all, let me give you this really important statistic. 80% of piercing a round number, 80-ish% of piercing cases come from commingling of funds. Okay. So my advice would be like you're unlikely to lose a piercing battle just on failure to maintain formalities in the paperwork. It's just not enough to get a judge to say, right? Because they know people are sloppy with this stuff. The commingled is the bad. And the common phrase used is using the company as your personal piggy bank. Now, Kirby, you and I both know there are no little ceramic pigs anymore left on children's dressers. But the idea is this, right? Using the company credit card for personal expenses, not once or twice, but like on the regular, tuition for the kids or, whatever it is, vacations, things you shouldn't. That's how piercing gets you. And because it's concrete, right? This expense is personal, not business. And they can just stack those and go look. And then once they have that, then they go to the documents. Okay. And if everything else is in order, maybe you're okay. So what I would tell you is that good paperwork, good governance paperwork will protect you from losing a commingling battle. But it's unlikely that bad governance paperwork would be enough on its own without commingling to get a judge to say yes to pierce, because we call it an extraordinary remedy in the law. It's a big deal to take someone's limited liability protection away from them, because it sets a precedent that because this ability, this limited liability, the first two L's in LLC, you get it in corporations too, right? This is the foundation of Western capitalism, like the ability to take risks with a fake person's life versus your own. That this company is why we take the risks we do. None of us, and you talk about risk all the time. You wouldn't take these risks if don't take risk you can't insure against. And so that's the idea. These LLCs and corporations allow us to take risks at a very low cost that we wouldn't take otherwise. And so piercing is extraordinary, and paperwork is a great hedge. But the thing that gets you in trouble is the money. So if you want an extra layer of protection, it's another thing is to observe these annuals. And of course, annual meetings for us are very simple. We do it for clients. So we call you every year. We walk you through it, right? So it's a service to make sure you don't, we are law firms and lawyers are risk reducers. That's our primary function, right? You think we're there to win fights. We're not there to win fights. We're there to lower your risk so that you can proceed confidently. And to your point, right, those documents, which are very simple for us and not simple for people that don't do it every day, are a very inexpensive way to protect yourself if you do make a commingling error, to say, well, the rest of it's fine. And it's unlikely that a judge is going to grab one thing and say, I'm piercing based on that, even if it's a lot of spending. So, yeah.
Got it. Okay. No, that I really appreciate that. And it makes a ton of sense. And because there's some large firms out there that you see at a lot of these big real estate events that are still selling the stacking model, and they try to scare you into, everyone's getting their corporate veil pierced. Here's all the things you have to buy from us to try to protect you from that. And so it's good to kind of put the statistics to it. If somebody has, I think a common commingling is once you start owning separate properties with separate entities, all of a sudden one property is short, and you got money sitting over in this other account, and it's easy to just grab it from that account and bring it over.
It is.
Is there a way to retroactively, if somebody listening to this has done that, go back and fix that? Yeah,
absolutely. First of all, the best time to get a solution is when you should have. The second best time is right now. There are no lost causes. Clients come in and they're all down in the mouth, and you can probably tell already, I'm not the kind of lawyer to get in the muck with them. I'm like, come on, man, stop. There's an answer here. Pick your head up. Let's go. So yes, of course. Go back. We do promissory notes. You loan one company to the other. Bing, bang, bong. You did it 15 times. Okay. Copy paste 15. Put the date. Put in statutory federal minimum interest, and move the money. I will say it's easier. Please make those mistakes inside the same calendar year if you want to make your lawyer very happy, right? What I don't want to hear in January is I made a mistake in October, right? But I do want to hear in October that I made a mistake in January. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right? It's
Yeah.
easier inside the year, but we'll still do it, right? And if you're running a relatively, like mom and pop's closely held thing, you're probably fine to go back a year, even two. You start to really at three, you start to get a little sketchy with the IRS, but like go back and paper those loans because the date that you say, the date effective date, from when you move the money, you're not really backdating. This is what you intended to do. Write it down, get it in writing, and then you have it. So you should go back. And I understand the in the moment. And my clients do this. Hey, Glenn, I moved this money. No problem, Bob. I'll get the note over there. How much was it? Is 3 years good? 2 years good? Yeah. And we do it. And I send it over via DocuSign and it's done. So, and it takes, an hour. So it's not worth letting it spin up into greater and greater liability. We can just fix it. So yes, papering after the fact is fine. And of course, as you might expect, the sooner the better, right? But there's always something to do. There's always something to do, and it will always reduce your risk. So like, don't get fatalistic because you think as a non-legal professional that you're sunk legally. That's crazy. Why would you know? So people get, and they never seem quite as confident about the good side of the law, but they're quite confident that's out to get them. And I'm like, no, it's just a set of rules. It's like math isn't out to get you either. Maybe you thought so in school, but you realize math doesn't care about you, right? And neither does the law. So like the idea is let's lower our risk together and paper the things after the fact. Sure, I'd like you to paper it ahead of time. I'd like all my clients to call me before they sign the contract and give me to review it. But sometimes we do what we can. So imperfect solutions are still solutions, and you should absolutely go back and paper things once you realize you messed it up. Because to your point, Kirby, that commingling, that left pocket, right pocket is, and so I always say offsets is the opposite of compliance, right? You say, oh, well, I was going to pay this. I'll just pay. He owes me 10. I owe him 5. I'm just going to move. No. 10 goes this way, 5 goes this way, not 5. No offsets. Don't do offsets. I know they feel good. Like, oh, I'm smart. I have 1 transaction instead of 3. Listen, sure, that's smart. So that's not the right kind of smart, right? So we're keeping receipts. That's what it is. You're making a record. If you want to be, and you're making an alibi, well, you can call it what you like, right? But you're setting a record so that you can prove what you need to prove if you ever need to prove it. And again, all to lower the risk. And if you're the kind of person that doesn't think insurance is a good idea, if you did make a claim, like maybe this advice isn't for you, but like for risk managers like me, like this is insurance and it's priced very, very smartly for what you get from it. So
yeah. Absolutely. No, that's great advice. And there's some people walking around with so much anxiety because they feel like they're going to be, shaken down at any minute by either the IRS or somebody who's going to sue them. And,
come find out.
Yeah. It's good to have somebody like you who you can consult with and ask these questions to. So
call me, talk about it. Like, I love it. And the thing is, like, it's almost always better just to ask somebody. It feels good just to get it out. I never make anybody feel bad for asking. We have a good time. It's, of course, it's very serious law that we do move hundreds of millions of dollars a year, but like, it doesn't have to be so dour. Like we can be light, ask your question, get a real answer, interact with it, and feel good about what you're doing going forward. Not everything has to be so. This is serious. This work is serious enough without adding seriousness. So we can have a real human chat, and you can ask your real human questions and get a real human answer, and feel good going forward. Yeah.
Awesome. And a big question that comes up when we talk about LLCs, because I think most people in real estate understand LLCs are generally the route to go if you're going to be buying real estate. But the big question is around, do I do a series LLC or individual LLCs? And I've had, I think, probably 4 or 5 different attorneys on this podcast since it started. This is episode, I think, 259.
Congratulations, 259.
Thank you. Yeah,
my man.
It started 2019 is when I started. So it's been
great.
Good
for
years.
Congrats, man. It's great.
Thank you. But it's interesting because I've had very different advice when it comes to this topic and several topics actually. But so what's your take on series versus individual?
So I'm not a fan of series. And the reason is that there's a lot of reasons, mostly that it's just not a national solution. There are states that don't recognize it. So you have full faith and credit issues. It's a better idea in theory than it is in practice. Okay. And for my practice, you have to talk me into letting you do it here. I will not just, here you go. They're expensive. They're big. They're complicated. And that's the problem. The important reason is something I call the series LLC tax. And that is the extra time and money that you are going to spend on me or whoever does this for you, explaining how your series works to people that don't know how it works. It will be an extra 20% of the money you spend on governance, maybe more, depending on how sophisticated the people you're working with are. And primarily, the bankers have the hardest time because they think it's something that it's not, that it is a way to refer to something collectively, legally, and it's not. The only entity that views your series as one thing is the Secretary of State where you file it. Everyone else, the IRS, other businesses you interact with, those are all separate entities, all of them. And there is no collective action. There's no parent. There's no collective. It's just these things. And case in point, when you say like I have Kirby's LLC, and it's a series, that doesn't mean anything. You have to say Kirby's LLC Series A to even be referring to a valid entity. And trying to get that through a banker's head when they just want to close the deal is not a good time. And so they're going to be on the phone with me for an hour, and then I got to call their boss, and that's another hour. And that's not my money, that's client's money. So if you have a real need, yes, but it has to be a need great enough to overcome the cost of it. And they say, oh, Glenn, it's just bad. Listen, 20 years in, I've never had a banker be easy to work with on series, ever. It's an explanation every time. And everyone you work with, why do I have to put the series name in? I thought there was a parent, and isn't there? No. And again, it may seem simple, but when you start interacting with it, you realize it's not so simple. And the reason is like, the only thing you're really saving is the Secretary of State fees. And so how much are those? Like $200 or $300, $400 per? What are you saving like annually? Like, so if you have 50, sure, but you have 4. So what are we doing? And so to that point, if you're not a person that's comfortable spending a lot of time with this and with me, maybe we don't do series, right? Maybe we don't. And so that's it, right? It's a useful tool at scale. And there are other areas, but it was designed for real estate developers, not investors, right? Developers, people who are taking a subdivision and taking a big plot of land and making, subdividing it into 300 pieces. And that's a lot of money to pay when you're already at risk as a developer. So that's what these were for. Now, there's also securities case use. That's not what we're here to discuss. So in general, if you don't have at least 10 properties, I won't even talk to you about it. You're wasting both of our time. And if you have 10 and that's probably it, but no. But if you have 10 on the way to 100, like, okay. But otherwise, like, no, you're not getting enough back. It will be more complicated for you, and that will last all year long, every year, versus the once a year savings that you get. No, it's not. It's almost never worth what it costs. And I don't mean the substantial upfront costs. I mean that tax. And so, like, the gain isn't big enough. There aren't magic LLCs. They do what LLCs do, right? They just, you can now in some states like Nevada, it's a no notice state. You can add a series without telling the Secretary of State. That's more risky than it is anything else. Like, okay, like what do you really need that for? Maybe you want that, but why do you want that, right? If you want to be able to expand quickly without having to go through the state, or it's a privacy issue, like maybe there are privacy reasons to use a series LLC, but those are not the ones I usually see with real estate investors.
Yeah. And so you still need a separate set of books for each
Absolutely.
LLC and series.
Each series is essentially its own LLC, and it gets its own tax ID, which I'm sure that you know, right? Because that's who does find out when you do a new one is the IRS. They get their own tax ID. They get their own bank account. That's what the tax ID is for, because a tax ID plus articles of organization or incorporation equal a bank account, right? Tax ID plus your articles, that's a bank account. Those two documents get you a bank account. So that's why we do. Each one has its own bank account. So what are you really saving? Yeah. You have this very odd naming rubric that you must follow precisely. Right. And it's going to confuse everybody to save a couple $100. Like, how much is your time worth? Like, I know how much my time is because I sell it. Right. So, I just don't, for almost everyone, it's not a good value prop. It's interesting, but just because something's interesting to me does not mean I want my clients to do it. Right. That's the wrong, we're not here to indulge my research interests. Right. Like, we're here to get you a solution that works. And I would say 9 times out of 10 series is not right. If it is, though, we're happy to do it. And I'd love to find more use cases. And nobody gets told no until we hear you out exactly what you're looking for and exactly what we can do to help you. But I do think it's about 90% no from this office on series, even though it's worth a ton of money to us. Again, you can't sell you something you can't use. You're never coming back. So yeah.
Yeah.
No
Yeah. And
one,
I
no
think,
one's serious.
well, I think a lot of people want to do the series because they feel like it's going to be less cumbersome. They feel like it's going to be lower maintenance. And I think the problem that I see with a lot of people is they grow to a point where they've grown into so much complexity that they're
Hmm.
overwhelmed and
Yep.
then they can't grow anymore. And so
Right.
do you have any suggestions around it? Because if you're forming one LLC per property, you get to a point where, you got 30 properties, you got 30 LLCs. That's a lot of
Yeah.
minutes. That's a lot of bank accounts. That's a lot, a lot of separate
Yeah.
sets of
I
books.
mean, the reality is you should be working with professionals that can do it for you. I mean, like managing governance at scale is very simple for a firm like ours and very difficult for a property owner. The reality is you figure out a professional service provider to help you get, like for us, like say we have someone that has 30 or 50 LLCs. Those LLCs are all in a calendar. They get an email every month that one's due. And it's not an email like, hey, we're going to do this for you. Like an annual plan for filings. And so that's what it is, right? And so it's costing them. It's just a line item expense. And again, whatever that is, that's the expense that none of your properties failing catastrophically affects any of the others, right? That's the idea. And so whatever that line item is, it is. And so if you can manage it yourself, that's great. But again, like lawyers do this very early in their career. I think everyone else does it later, right? Figure out how much your hour is worth. Okay.
Mm,
And then go, okay, it takes me 3 hours to clean my house. I am either a very reasonably priced corporate attorney or the world's most expensive house cleaner. Like, why am I doing? So do you want to be the world's best paid governance clerk? Then don't do your own governance, right? Economists don't mow their own lawns. Lawyers don't clean their own houses. And investors shouldn't be doing their own governance. Like it's at 30, at 20, at 10, it should be ours, right? And if you can't find a firm that'll do it for you, like we work in all 50 states, like give us a holler. And if we don't work for you, we'll find someone awesome that does. This doesn't need to be something that people are doing at that 10, 20, 30 entity stack. Like, no. Do it when you have two or three, learn it so you know what to ask for and how to call someone out if they get it wrong, and then hand it off. It's just, you should know enough to know how to check somebody and then give it to someone else to do. You don't want to be a part-time governance clerk. It doesn't pay. I have them. It doesn't pay what your listeners are looking to make,
yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's a younger demographic. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. No, and that's great. And Glenn actually has a white paper on the basic. I understand it's the basics of LLCs, right? That people should
I do. The
understand.
ABCs of LLCs. Yep. Yep.
Awesome.
And
Awesome. So
well,
I'll link
I
that up.
will, do you have that? I'll send it over to you so you can post it up.
Cool. Yeah, I'll put the link to it in the show notes. So if you're
Excellent.
listening to this, you can access that there. Um,
And that's really a place to go to, like, just go find out. It's not written. It's written for non-lawyers, written for business owners. Okay. It's so you can access the information,
perfect.
and it is critically important to understand LLCs because we win all the time doing the work that everyone thinks is like, too, it's beneath them to care about the entities. We win all the time because the entities are the rules. It's if in this game, the entity governance is the rules to the game. And so if you don't know them, you might win, but you probably won't. And
Yeah.
so knowing what you can and can't do, knowing where your authority ends, knowing where the good fences and good neighbors, if that, right? So knowing all that makes you a better business owner every time, no exceptions. So learning a little bit about LLCs you'll be surprised how much nonsense you'll suddenly see around you. Wrongness.
Yeah. It's
Clients
like the
come back all the time.
fundamentals, right? In
And they go,
sports.
I didn't realize how bad it was out there. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
It's bad. I looked at that document again that I downloaded and I realized how bad it is now. And I'm like, yeah. And there's people out there running legitimate businesses with millions of dollars, just all at risk because their document is just, they couldn't spend an extra, little bit on the documents that, it's bridged too far. They'll roll the dice. That is, it's when you know what these risks are and how easy it is to reduce them to the point where they're manageable. It's like bungee jumping without a cord just because, like, yeah, it's exciting, but like, until you hit the ground. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's kind of like the knowing the fundamentals in sports. You got to learn
Absolutely.
that before you get too fancy. So,
yeah, making a multi-unit deal is all well and good, but how are you going to hold it is a question you should have asked.
Yeah.
But like not at closing, right? And so I think that just helping people, and again, if you don't want to care about this stuff, like let us care about it for you. Like that's the idea. Is like we'll educate you, so not so that you can do it yourself, but so that you don't have to, so you can trust what we're doing because there's points to verify. Oh, I know this, I know this, I know that. So you can spot check like your clients do. They're not doing all the things. A spot check, right? Inspect, so they can check and then feel comfortable that the job's being done without abdicating, right? They're just delegating it to us, not abdicating it to us. So I don't let clients abdicate to me, even if they want to, no matter how much money they have. You have to know what's happening. Otherwise,
That's awesome.
that's the wrong job. So like you want to understand enough to know how to check your lawyer, but probably not enough to do it yourself, because if you're going to get a JD, then come work here.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
if you're going to invest in real estate, like don't get a JD if you don't already have one.